It is about 100 years since that great Canadian-born physician Sir William Osler, Regius Professor of Medicine in Oxford, complained about the increasing influence of the pharmaceutical industry on the medical profession. He would be turning in his grave at the way the industry now dominates doctors' prescribing habits. It does this not only by direct and indirect pressure on the doctors themselves, but also by encouraging the public to ask for scripts. Touchdown confirmed. We are safe on Mars. The control room at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory late in the evening of August 5, Pacific Time, when word arrived that the Curiosity rover had landed safely on Mars. The 1-ton rover, which dwarfs all Mars landers that came before it, will now spend a planned 2 years exploring the Martian surface. The mission is expected to cost $5 billion. Curiosity's task is to investigate the inside of Gale Crater, where a giant mound of sedimentary deposits may provide evidence of a wetter, possibly habitable Mars billions of years ago. But first it had to survive an elaborate landing sequence which appears to have gone smoothly. Curiosity landed on time and on target and soon beamed back grainy photos of its wheels and its shadow. Given the car-like size of the rover and the challenges of landing on Mars, Curiosity's landing goes down as one of the greatest parking jobs in history.
There's no doubt that we have more consumer choices today than ever before. We all think we're good at making choices. Some of us even enjoy making them. And you would think that with all these consumer choices that people would be spending more money because they can get exactly what they want. Well, actually, that's not always the case. Let me tell you about one study that has produced results about this that are really quite counterintuitive. An experiment was done in an upmarket specialty grocery store in the U.S., where a tasting booth was set up, first offering consumers 24 different varieties of jam to try, and then at another time, they offered 6 varieties. Now, when there were more varieties, more customers stopped to try than when there were only 6. But only about 3% of them actually went ahead and selected a product to buy. This is where it's interesting. When there were just 6 varieties, fewer people stopped to try, but what the researchers noticed, and what they didn't expect, was that 30% of them bought a jar of jam. What does this show? Well, it shows that we have choice overload, that up to a point, choice is good, but beyond that, it overwhelms consumers.
We all know that the capital of the United States is Washington, D.C. However, when America first became a country, Washington didn't even exist. Back then, Philadelphia was the logical choice as the new country's capital.
Why Philadelphia? Why not Boston, New York, or even Charleston?
For several reasons. First, Philadelphia had a roughly central location in the U.S. at that time. Also, it had been a focal point of the American Revolution. The Continental Congress had met there before the war, and several major events took place there. So, why is Washington the capital and not Philadelphia? Mostly because of a riot in Philadelphia in 1783. Congress was meeting there when some soldiers disrupted them. The soldiers demanded payment for their service during the war, but Congress had no money. It asked the government of Pennsylvania to protect it, but the government refused. Congress promptly left Philadelphia, so that ruled out Philadelphia. Congress realized it couldn't rely on the states to defend it. Thus, the members of Congress decided to create an entirely new area called the District of Columbia. Several states competed for the right to host the district, but ultimately, Congress decided on a stretch of land between Virginia and Maryland. Like Philadelphia, it was near the geographical center of the country. The necessary land was given to the federal government. Construction on the new capital then began, and that's how Washington, D.C. became our capital. Let's look at its design now.
Plan on breaking bread with friends and family this holiday season, but worried about the salt? Well, chemists may have come up with an enlightening solution. They've discovered that bread that's more airy tastes saltier. The finding is in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry. There's sodium chloride in everything we eat. It enhances flavor and improves the shelf life of foods. But too much salt can contribute to hypertension, and baked goods top the list of offenders. So, can we cut back on sodium without saying no to dinner rolls? To find out, researchers hit the kitchen, and they whipped up some loaves with the same amount of salt, but with different textures. By adjusting how long they allowed the dough to rise, they made breads that were either fine-grained and dense, or more porous and light. And they found that volunteers rated the fluffier bread as tasting more briny. By collecting samples of their subjects' spit, the researchers determined that bread with larger pores releases its sodium faster when it's chewed. It's that rush of sodium that makes salt a mouth-watering saline sensation, even if there's less of it.
What's an article? What's an article? I was asking myself this very question in the post office yesterday, standing in line waiting to sign for, as it so happens, an article. A postal article, not the postal article. Now, before we get ahead of ourselves, an article in English is a word that precedes a noun and simply indicates specificity. This sounds quite complicated, and to be honest, it's quite complicated to say without spraying everyone within 15 feet, but the concept's quite simple. The definite article in English is the word the and indicates a specific thing or type. For example, the train is an hour late. By contrast, the indefinite article in English is any of the words a, an, or some, and the indefinite article indicates a non-specific thing. For example, would you please pass me an apple? We always precede a word with a if it doesn't start with a vowel sound. For example, take a hike. I'm spending a weekend at Bernie's. Or there's a knight in shining armor. Similarly, we precede words with the indefinite article an if they do start with a vowel sound. For example, an ostrich, an enormous mess, or an occupational health and safety policy.
For anthropologists and archaeologists, rock art is a kind of window into our ancestors' evolution, migration, and lifestyle. These insights that we get from rock art are highly valued by archaeologists because they complement the often scant information provided by excavated objects. It turns out that there are common themes in rock art between sites in Europe and caves where they have discovered rock art in China. In fact, some recurring motifs in rock art have been observed all over the world. It is truly remarkable that the hunter-gatherers of the Yunnan province in China left very similar creations to the Magdalenians, who lived nearly 9,000 kilometers away in Western Europe and thousands of years prior. Both feature outline images of human predators and prey, from bears and lions to stags, horses, and bulls. Now, both regions were inhabited by hunter-gatherers on similar terrain, but there's more to it than that. One thing that we think it might reflect, this similarity of rock art in these distant places, is that human beings are essentially the same in their thinking. So whether it's the ancient people of Europe or in Asia, they did things and drew things in very similar ways.
Space War. Listen to part of a lecture in an international politics class and answer the questions.
Space became another arena for competition after the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, an artificial satellite, in 1957. Americans felt humiliated. The Soviets launched a rocket that could have easily carried a nuclear bomb. The United States did not even launch its first satellite, Explorer 1, until 1958. The already gloomy public mood took a turn for the worse when the Soviets placed the first man in orbit in 1961. President Kennedy's answer to this was to commit the United States to land a man on the moon and bring him back before this decade is out. In August 1962, John H. Glenn Jr. was the first American to orbit the Earth. In the mid-1960s, U.S. scientists used the Gemini program to look at the effects of extended space flight on man. Gemini, Latin for twins, carried 2 astronauts, one more than the earlier Mercury series and one less than the Apollo spacecraft. Gemini achieved several firsts, an 8-day mission in August 1965, the longest space flight at that time, and in November 1966, the first automatically controlled re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. Gemini also accomplished the first manned link-up of 2 spacecraft in flight, as well as the first U.S. walks in space. The Apollo project achieved Kennedy's goal. In July 1969, with hundreds of millions of television viewers watching around the world, Neil A. Armstrong became the first human to walk on the surface of the moon.
We are going to discuss mitosis. Mitosis is a process of cell division. As a result of cell division, 2 daughter cells are produced from a single parent cell. The daughter cells are identical to one another and to the original parent cell. Mitosis includes 4 phases called prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. Let's discuss each phase here. In prophase, each chromosome duplicates to form 2 sister chromatids. In metaphase, the chromosomes line up at the equatorial plate and are held by microtubules and the centromere. In anaphase, the centromeres divide and sister chromatids separate and move toward the matching poles. Finally, in telophase, daughter chromosomes arrive at the poles and the microtubules disappear. The chromatin expands. The cytoplasm divides and the cell membrane pinches inward, producing 2 daughter cells.
It is claimed by neuroscientists, among others, that speaking 2 or more languages increases cognitive abilities and in some way rewires the brain, as it were, in a way that positively affects how the brain works. And it's true that we tend to think of people who can speak 2 or more languages as being bright. Learning a language is, anyway, good mental exercise, not to mention its benefits in introducing you to other peoples and cultures. This is why all school curricula should include at least 1 compulsory foreign language. Anyone who knows 2 languages will find that in certain circumstances they compete for position, the vocabulary of one getting in the way of the other. Often, bi- or multilingual people find one language more suitable for expressing certain kinds of thoughts or feelings. There is another view on being bilingual, not from a neuroscientist, but from someone whose business involves words and language. Brought up in a bilingual home, speaking Greek and French, and also fluent in English, she is old enough to remember when her native language, Greek, was also in effect 2 languages. There was the formal correct form, katharevousa, which was taught and spoken in schools, written in newspapers and books, and so on, and the everyday demotic language you used with your friends. As for her view on bilingualism, she says that you end up with a split personality.